Welcome to Sleepytime Stories, your place to our mind to drift and to dream. But tonight our dreams may wander somewhere darker. Crystal ball before we begin. Back and index pointing right. Plug in your headphones or AirPods. Tuck yourself under the covers. Light bulb dim the lights, so turn them off completely. I let the shadows grow soft around you. Tonight's tale is unlike any other. It's not just one story, but a whispered collection of chilling events, each one rooted in real moments, real places, real people. Some still unsolved, some never spoken of again, so close your eyes. Let the stillness wrap around you. And listen closely, because the night remembers everything. Candle, this is Sleeptime Stories, where dreams may come, and so may the things we fear in the dark. I was 10 years old when Grandma came to live with us. It was about 6 months after Grandad passed away, and I guess, looking back, she must have been lonely in that big house of theirs, rattling around with only the grief and memories for company. So despite a few protests from Mom, my parents took her in. There were no protests from me. None at all. Grandma was loud and fun, and I loved her. She had an almost limitless supply of boiled sweets, and she'd always slip me a couple whenever she saw me. She was always the first to stick up for me when I got in trouble too. But it was her stories I loved best. Grandma had all kinds of stories. Stories about growing up during WW2, and stories about the things she'd get up to with her friends on the south coast after her family had been evacuated. Sad stories, funny stories, adventure stories. But it was her scary stories that were my favorite. Grandma had lots of scary stories. She told me she dabbled in the occult when she was a teenager, trying out Ouija boards with her friends. Tarot cards, fortune telling, all that stuff. Most of the stories I'd laugh off or forget about not long after she was done telling them, but there were a couple that really did spook me a bit. I was only 10 at the time, you have to understand. And Grandma certainly knew how to bring the stories to life. She'd shut off the lights in my room so only the glow of the night sky shone through the curtains, and she'd shuffle in real close. Close enough so I could see the wrinkles on her face and smell the boiled sweets on her breath. Close enough so her deep blue eyes could stare straight into mine. She must have given me nightmares with a few of those tales, but now, years later, there's only one that I can still remember. Only one that stuck with me. The story about the shower and Mr. Longfingers. Grandma told me about Mr. Longfingers one night after I asked about her baths. Grandma used to love her baths. She'd spend ages in them, light candles and incense, and lie in the tub humming to herself until the water turned cold. It drove my mum crazy. But when I asked her why she loved them so much, she said it was the only place she could relax. It was the only place that was safe for her to relax. You know, people like me who are, well, more sensitive to certain things, we have to have baths, she told me seriously one night, shuffling closer on the bed. I couldn't possibly spend that long in the shower. It'd be far too risky. Grandma stared at me with those blue eyes of hers, and smiling, and I knew it was time for one of her stories, one of the scary ones. I shivered with pleasure and pulled the covers up to my chin. Why is it risky, Grandma? She half turned to look out the window, watching me from the corner of her eye, posing for effect. I waited, feeling my heart rate pick up ever so slightly in my chest. Well, she said after a moment, it's only risky if you close your eyes, of course. If you close your eyes for longer than 10 seconds. What do you mean? Why? Well, do you ever play that game in the playground with your friends? The one where someone turns their back and the others sneak up on them when they're not looking. I nodded and Grandma nodded back, exactly. So that's what it's like in the shower, when you have your eyes closed. That's what it's like with Mr. Longfingers. A cold itch to go back. Here's Mr. Longfingers, Grandma. She let out a deep breath, as if she wished she hadn't said anything, turned her head back to face mine. When she next spoke, she'd lowered her voice. No one knows exactly, Grandma whispered. Some think it's a creature that's attracted to the heat and smell we give off in there. Others think it's a demon that finds a way into our realm through the dense steam clouds. No one can say for sure, because the only ones who have actually seen Mr. Longfingers aren't ever going to be able to tell you. I pulled in a breath. Why not? Grandma shuffled closer along the bed and leaned towards me, leaving my question hanging in the air. Don't you worry about it, sweetheart. Don't worry your pretty head. As long as you remember the rules, you'll be fine. What rules? Well, when you're in the shower, you try not to close your eyes for too long. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 is just about okay, too. But any longer than that, yeah. Then what? Well, any longer than that, and you may just start to feel something in the room with you. Something watching. And if you ever go longer than 15 seconds, that's when you might start to hear a noise too. Hear what? The soft tap 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 of fingers on glass. Fingers drumming against the glass door of the shower. If you do ever hear that noise, God forbid, will you make me a promise? What, Grandma? Promise me you'll never open your eyes. Asterisk had barely slept that night. Hardly at all. I'd close my eyes and try to relax, but every time I did I'd imagine a face pressed against my bedroom window, staring in at me. And when I did finally get to sleep, I had nightmares. Bad ones. I had them all week, in fact. Dreams about disembodied eyes watching me in the dark, and long fingers reaching out to touch my exposed skin. It wasn't any better when I was awake either. Not really. The shower was the worst. That's when Grandma's story really got to me. I'd never thought about it before, but suddenly I had trouble shutting my eyes in there. I'd be standing beneath the beating water, shampoo running down my face, and as soon as I squinted my eyelids closed, I'd hear Grandma's words running through my head. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 is just about okay, too. What? Any longer than that? I'd rope my hair fast, feeling the shampoo dripping off my chin, and as soon as I'd counted past 5 seconds, I feel it. A sort of pressure. Not a feeling of being watched exactly, but something close to that. I'd run my fingers faster and faster through my hair, frantically trying to get the suds out, and the ready blackness behind my closed eyes coupled with the rush of water in my ears would feel like a hell breath, like the silence before a scream. The seconds would race through my mind and I'd be so desperate to open my eyes again that I'd sometimes do it before my hair was rinsed fully clean and my eyes would sting with shampoo. But before I shut them again, I'd always be sure to peer out through the stained glass door of the shower cubicle, just to make sure I was still alone. Asterisk, it wasn't long before Mum realized something was up. She heard me crying out in my sleep one night and came in to comfort me. Asked me what the matter was, and it all came up. I told her about Grandma's stories and about Mr. Longfingers. She got this look on her face when I was telling her, like she used to get with me when I'd made her really mad. This wide-eyed, angry look. Only this time she wasn't angry with me. She was angry with Grandma. My parents' room was next to mine, and sometimes, if I pressed my ear against the wall, I could hear them talking in there. Soft whispers. That night, though, after Mum was satisfied I wasn't scared anymore and she'd gone back to her room, the whispers weren't soft at all. Oh no. I heard Mum hissing to Dad about Grandma, about the story she told me. Mum's voice floated through the wall, sharp and crisp. You know what your fucking mother said to him now, don't you, Simon? Dad's response was an unintelligible mutter. She's told him there's a monster that'll get him if he shuts his eyes in the shower. A monster. The poor kid's been having nightmares about it all week. Seriously, Simon, you'd better say something to her tomorrow morning, first thing, or I will. Grandma came to visit me in my room the following night. That time, as she perched on the end of my bed, there were no stories. Nothing like that. Grandma just sat there and stared down at me, her blue eyes wide and sad. The light from the moon outside my window lit up her wrinkled face. You know I'd never let anything bad happen to you, told you? She said after a moment. I nodded my head. I know, Grandma. You know I wouldn't let you come to any harm. I nodded again. Okay, good. That's good. She looked away from me for a moment out the window. You know, the things I tell you in the evening are meant to help you, sweetheart. They're meant to toughen you up a bit, protect you. She paused and shook her head. But maybe your mom's right. Maybe I went too far this time. She looked down at me and smiled. But even then, even though I was only 10 years old, I could tell it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll tell you what Grandma said. You know what I told you about Mr. Longfingers and the shower? Well, I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'll scare the bastard off, how about that? It won't come back in a hurry if it has to face me. I stared up at Grandma, watching her face glow in the moonlight. Watching her smile down at me, I nodded my head. Once, Asterisk, I was the one who found her. I don't know when exactly it happened, but I guess it was about a week after we had the talk in my room. A week after she told me she wouldn't let me come to any harm. I woke early that morning from a bad dream to a heavy thumping sound. I sat bolt upright in bed. My room was quiet around me, and I couldn't hear anything from the wall that joined my parents' room either. But the house wasn't entirely silent. Floating down the hall, muffled by my closed door, I could hear the sound of rushing water, the noise of the shower. I leapt out of bed and ran down the upstairs hallway, heart already pounding in my chest. As soon as I reached the closed bathroom door, I started banging on it. A deep terror was welling up inside me like cold water from a well, something I couldn't place, and I kept banging and shouting Grandma over and over again, even though she didn't respond. Off to my right I was dimly aware of voices from my parents' room, the sleepy shuffle of footsteps, but before they had a chance to make it out onto the landing, I'd lifted my hand to test out the door handle, more out of instinct than because I thought it might actually open. But the door wasn't locked. I kept banging with my free hand, and it swung suddenly inwards, bringing me face to face with a wall of steam. Heat struck my skin. I squinted my eyes against the damp fog and peered into the bathroom. And before Dad pushed me to one side, before everything around me descended into shouting and tears and chaos, I saw her. I saw Grandma. She was lying naked on the floor in the shower cubicle, the water beating down around her, blue eyes bulging from her face. One hand was curled against her chest, like a dead bird, while the other trailed against the glass of the shower cubicle, a flailing finger mark she'd carved through the steam, still clear and fresh. Asterisk, it was a heart attack that killed her. That's what my dad told me. He said Grandma was old, and the thing had struck her quickly and suddenly. She would have died fast and without pain, Dad said. She wouldn't have suffered. I knew better though. Even as a 10-year-old kid, I knew better. And years later, writing this as an adult, I still know better. I also know my wife and kids resent me for refusing to have a shower in the house, for insisting everyone take baths. They pretend it's okay, and they humor me, but I can tell they don't really understand it. Not at all. My wife thinks she does. She thinks I still carry the trauma of seeing my grandmother dying in front of me when I was little. I guess she's right, in a way. But she doesn't know the full truth. Nobody does. And no one would believe me even if I told them. No one would believe me if I said the reason I don't take showers, the reason I haven't had one since I was 10 years old, isn't because I'm scarred from the sight of dead body. It's because all those years ago, when I crept back into the still hot bathroom after the paramedics had taken Grandma's body downstairs, I made sure to check the marks her fingers had carved through the steamed glass of the shower cubicle. Real true events mentioned by different persons. Let's dive into it. If you love any story or experience, do comment. Let's begin. Next, once I was working in a restaurant and got done at around 12ish. I always rode my bicycle to and from work. It was about 15 minutes long, a bike trail next to the train tracks. This trail was constantly straight, but had quite a few exits here and there. It also only had a few small parts of it lit up by street lights, so without my front bicycle light I would be totally blind for the most part. So this one night I leave almost home after the shift, and I notice a guy is biking behind me, which isn't too weird at the time of night in a busy but very safe city. It was weird that he had no lights and was still there after the first main exit, which after that led to a small town, but I thought it might just be a coincidence. I felt a bit creeped out and thought I might just be tired and the dark of the night is getting to me. So I decided to bike a bit slower and let this person pass. There was definitely enough room on this trail. The person started drifting along at the same speed as me and made no attempt to pass or even come closer. This is about when I'm a few minutes away from home and decide to take some random lefts and rights instead of going straight home, just in case this person was following me and wouldn't find out where I live. I bike around going in random twists and turns in a suburban neighborhood, and he's still behind me. What I then did is I noticed I was heading straight for a long small dark path only for bicycles. I decided to turn into one of the houses and hide in the dark shadows from the garage. I heard this person pass the house and brake quickly in that small path. At this moment my blood is boiling. Now I hop on my bike, and when I passed the edge of the street I stopped and stared that person in the eyes. Well, that's what I hope he thought, cause I actually couldn't see anything of his face. I biked so fast, then did another few extra loops here and there until I felt safe and alone again to go home. Never had anything like it afterwards, and still don't know who or why it could have been. I'm happy not knowing. Edit, I'm an average sized girl and in my early 20s when this happened. TLDR, bicycled home after a late shift in the dark and someone was clearly following me, was able to hide and get away. Next, I'm a little late to the party, but this one filled my nightmares for a long time after it happened. A couple years ago, I was living in Colombo, Sri Lanka, at a small hostel on the outskirts of the city. The hostel catered to long-term guests, so I got to know everyone pretty well who lived there. There was a guy living with us. His name was Raj, and Raj was a middleman of sorts in the casinos. In Sri Lanka, the casinos are incredibly shady places full of Russian mobsters and other low-life criminals from China and India. The casinos are technically illegal, but they continue operation through bribery and government coercion. I went to one of them one time and it was a surreal experience. Anyway, my friend Rod's job was to take online bets from Indian clients and make them physically in the casino. He was playing with their money and was simply the vessel to allow individuals to play from another location. He played in some high-stakes games and with a lot of money for some powerful people. Basically a recipe for disaster. One night, he fucked up big time. One of his clients managed to gain access to his online system and stole all of the money his clients had deposited to play with, a sum well over $50,000 US. Which is a fortune in Sri Lanka. We only found out about the theft after Raj's disappearance. A note was left in his bed, very cryptic, saying don't look for me and I'm leaving among other things. Dude vanished overnight. We made a police report and waited to hear anything. After a few days, the police come back to visit, asking someone who knew Raj to join them. The locals in the hostel were afraid to go with the police, so I volunteered and was taken to their headquarters. They took me to the back where I was shown photos of a body cut into pieces. It was Raj. He'd been cut apart and dumped into the sewer canal nearby by someone. They'd brought me there to identify the body. They never found who did it either, and the image of those photos had never really left me. I'll forever be haunted by it, and I left the hostel shortly afterwards. Poor guy was caught up in some shady stuff, but he didn't deserve that. Next, not exactly a lonely road, but I was speeding west on the Minus 70 through Colorado near Glenwood Canyon when I decided to slow down and enjoy the view. I noticed a state patrol car in front of me a minute later when he turns on his sirens, and I think he's got me busted for speeding. Instead, he's pulling to the shoulder up ahead to help a broken down motorist. I slowed down and remember looking at the motorist who is sitting in the driver's seat with their head down, thinking, man, that guy is lucky to get help out here. No cell coverage, etc. I keep driving west. A few minutes later I start to notice police cars flying past me headed back east, sirens blaring, going extremely fast through a curvy canyon. One after another for like 15 minutes, ambulances, fire trucks, seems like all emergency response in the country is headed back the direction I came from. The next day, I'm at a hotel in Utah and discover what happened. Turns out the broken down motorist had skipped bail, and after being confronted by the state trooper who was there to offer assistance, exited his car and began shooting the officer in his back multiple times. On a normal day, the officer would have died as they typically drive alone. But on that day he was headed to training and had a partner in the car who empties his clip and killed the motorist. Officer almost bled out on the road but survived. Next, I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5 something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired. No one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 Coors Lights I'd had. No known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. Next, when we first moved out to where we live now, 22 years ago, I would lose time intermittently. Never 7 hours like you, but like a good half hour or so. Getting to the nearest highway from our house used to take no more than 5 minutes. The main road we lived off of was a country road, little traveled, no lights or stop signs, and speed limit is 45 mph. People in the area were always barreling through at 60 or more, though. Commute to work was roughly 30 minutes if there was traffic, 20 minutes without. I needed to be at the office by 8, so I would leave by 7 every morning to give myself a nice cushion. Yet somehow, some days, I would get there right at 8 a.m. It was baffling. I mentioned it to my husband and he said I must have left later than I meant, or the traffic was slower than usual and I just hadn't noticed, etc. But it was frustrating to me. I tried to pay better attention to the exact time that I left the house, even jotting it down in my vehicle maintenance log that my husband kept in the center console. I began to notice that I would reach the highway a full 20 minutes, 25 minutes after I'd left the house. The 2-mile segment that should only take me about 5 minutes was somehow turning into almost half an hour time frame. I couldn't explain it, and it didn't happen all the time, just enough that it became noticeable. Then my husband, who worked the night shift, also began to realize that something similar seemed to be happening to him. He would leave work at 3:30 a.m. and had a 45-minute commute, but would sometimes find himself pulling into our driveway at nearly 4:45. Sometimes he called me on his way home because he felt drowsy, and I would keep him company by chit-chatting until he got home. Even so, somehow he wasn't getting home till later than the 45-minute usual commute. It was unusual and unsettling enough that we started to get onto the highway by taking the roundabout route, which would tack on about 5 minutes to the normal 5-minute commute time from home to the highway. The lost time episode stopped. Over time we went back to using the regular, shorter route and haven't since experienced any issues. However, it should be noted that what was once a little traveled, tree-lined country road has since become annoyingly congested with traffic due to all the new neighborhoods in the area. The trees that lined the road were razed to the ground. New houses, shopping centers, and schools have sprouted where the trees used to be. And the 5-minute ride from our house to the highway can sometimes take as long as 20 minutes due to the traffic and new lights. So, were our little lost time episodes important to the longer commute times to come? We sometimes wonder. Next, when I was 18, my family and I took a vacation to Hawaii. My mother wanted to do the touristy thing and do the road to Hana. Normally you can take a tour bus up it, but that wasn't good enough for her. So we rented a car. The rental companies typically forbid driving that road because of the liability issues. That didn't stop my mother. We had a normal drive up there, plenty to see. We spent all day exploring. So by the time everyone was exhausted, it was night. Now we were a good ways away from the road down, think back dirt roads of Maui. So what do? Go down some of the closed off local roads. This one road, in particular, was a very narrow winding road over the edge of the island. You couldn't even stop on the road to get out and pee. If you looked over the edge, it was a straight drop into the ocean. Anyhow, so we were driving in the dead of the night slowly, and we approached this weird bend that backs up to a heavily forested area, a small waterfall, and a cliff overhang just above us. My mother wanted to take some pictures of the moon, stars, ocean because it was breathtaking with no city lights. So we pull off to the side of this road with just enough space to let another car pass you. I'd of course get out too. It was dead silent. Then all of a sudden I hear what sounds like a crying baby, which was weird. We were in the middle of nowhere and hadn't seen anyone for hours. So I'm just standing there, confused, and it stops. I motion for my mother to come over and ask if she heard anything. She didn't. So we stand there for a little longer and it starts up again. Neither of us could pinpoint where it was coming from. Both of us were panicked because that's what baby crying does to most humans. We spent a good hour calling out and trying to figure out what to do. Eventually it stopped. We returned back to the hotel and never heard anything about it. Next, once my friend and I were hiking on an overnight trip to the summit of this peak. In order to get from the campgrounds to the peak, you had to, unless you wanted to cross a deep river, walk across the mountain ridges and then descend into a valley in order to climb out of the valley onto another set of mountain ridges. It is impossible to reach the mountain in one day, so you have to find a place to camp for the night. In this area of Alaska, everywhere is tundra and mountains except for the valley between the two ridges. There is cover from the wind there, so we decided to set up camp there. It is important to note that the campground has the only road leading to civilization for miles. To come from any direction other than the one we came from would mean the nearest town is more than 100 miles away. Also important side note, when we arrived we were the only people at the campground. It is late at night and we are trying to fall asleep when we hear footsteps approaching, so human footsteps and a raspy breathing. It was human for sure, not animal. We were armed with a bolt-action rifle for protection from bears, so we asked who was out and there was no reply. We then heard them knock over our clothes drying rack. I was scared shitless and warned the person outside that we were armed. Footsteps suddenly picked up as the person ran past our tent opposite of the direction of the campgrounds. There was no tracking of a pack as they ran, which I found odd. It was a sleepless night, and when the sun shone on the valley, we exited our tent to find our clothes drying rack in tatters, and there were small boot prints in the ground leading towards and away from our tent. We made it to the mountain and hightailed it back to the campground as fast as we could. I don't know who that was, but I didn't go camping for a while after that. Next, I've posted this on Reddit a couple of times, but here it is again, just because it fits. Back in the early 90s, I worked for Domino's Pizza. When this happened, I was an assistant manager, but we had to deliver sometimes too. This night, just after 11:00, I made a delivery to a house in one of our middle-income neighborhoods. I get to the house and there is not a light on. If the porch light wasn't on, we're supposed to go to a payphone and call the number on the order that was to prevent robberies. I never did that. I would just go ahead and go to the door. For this night, I sat in my car a minute and I just had a gut feeling, and I always listen to my gut. So I drove back 2 blocks to a payphone and called the number. It was disconnected. I decided to wait just a minute before making the second call we were supposed to make. If they didn't answer the second time, we were supposed to go back to the store. As I stood there, I noticed a Pizza Hut drive-thru, but really didn't think about it. You spot each other while on the road. I called back, still disconnected. For some reason, I decided to return to the house and just see if someone comes to the door. I get back and realize the Pizza Hut car is sitting in my driveway. I think, what the hell? I turn in the long driveway that is lined on the left side by tall evergreen tree/oak things. I immediately notice there is something big on the ground next to the open driver's door of the Pizza Hut car. I pull up behind him and park, and realize that it's the driver. I decide he must have had a heart attack or something, so I run up to see what I can do to help. When I get to him, I realize his skull has been caved in so bad I can actually see his brains. I run back to my car and lock the door. I drive like 90 mph those 2 blocks to the payphone and call the cops. Then I call my store and tell them what is going on and have them call Pizza Hut. I wait for the cops to come through and I go back. Eventually the detective comes over to talk to me. He tells me that first, in the bushes next to the driveway, they found a realty sign, the power is off, and the house is completely empty. They also found 2 sets of footprints in the bushes. It appears they ordered from both places and waited for whoever got there first to rob. I was first, but because I didn't get out of the car, they had to wait on Pizza Hut to show up. If only I got out of the car the first time, that would have been me laying on the ground dead. For some reason, a gut feeling perhaps, I did not do what I normally did. I never knocked on another door without the front porch light on, unless I knew the customer really well. Next, I was camping in my car while on a drive up to see my family in Salt Lake. I was taking my time on what should have been about an 11-hour car drive with minimal stops. But this time I was on my own, so I was stopping to take in views and all that. I think I was about 18, and not much money to my name, so instead of getting a pricey room for the night, I decided I'd just find a secluded place off the freeway in the desert. For anyone that's ever driven the route, it was about an hour past the racetrack just outside of Las Vegas. It was one of those exits where there were just farm roads coming off it. So I assumed I wasn't gonna be on anyone's land that would mind too much or ever check on me. I pulled off and parked up, was sat on my tailgate enjoying my dinner of beef jerky and Arizona tea while listening to music. Just normal stuff. Out of nowhere, a fucking motorcycle flies past me. No lights, no nothing. It was going fast enough that it took me a solid 20 seconds to put it all together. Laughed and shook my head just thinking how dumb it was, but it's their life, do what they want. Not a minute later, two low-flying jets fly overhead. Top Gun style, curving mountains and battling battles. It was a great show. Then 10 minutes later or so, a convoy comes rolling down the road. I could hear it before I saw the lights. Now I grew up in the military, so I'm used to seeing this shit. But this felt different. Maybe it was just a series of events. Normally you see a convoy, you wave at M and let them go by. But it was nearly midnight and something told me to just turn around and pretend I didn't see anything. A Humvee pulls up and basically blocks me from moving my vehicle. Could hear doors open, but no one gets out to come to me. I was leaning on my hood at this point. The car was awful but didn't even tend to look at them. Keep my hands away from me and on the hood. I could feel them just looking at me. Convoy passes, Humvee pulls out and goes on their way. I really think it was just a series of events. The jets were probably doing practice since the AFB is right next to LV. The motorcycle was just some dude taking advantage of empty roads, and the convoy was just out for some training like the jets. Next I had freshly turned 18 and was working a closing shift at a small cafe in a grocery store. One of my regular customers comes in, Tom. Tom was a hugger. He'd come in and call out with my girls, and we'd all have to awkwardly hug this 80-year-old man while he whispered, "God bless you," in your ear. I hated Tom. He always held on a little too long and whispered a little too close. On the shift, I was closing alone and Tom came in at about 4 p.m. Not unusual. I dealt with the creepy and got him his coffee and bagel. He was with his wife this time. She was sweet but tired looking. He started asking me questions as I worked. What do I have to do at night? Is it hard closing alone? What time am I off? Do I ever get scared walking to my car in the dark? The questions got progressively more uncomfortable and his wife just sat there silently. I answered as friendly as I could, despite the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I would catch him staring at me often. It was okay though, I was off work at 7, so it wasn't a big deal. Until he didn't leave. His wife went home without him, and he just stayed, staring for hours. I asked if there was anything else he needed. He said no, I'm just waiting for you to get off of work. He wanted to walk me to my car, he said, because young girls shouldn't be in a dark parking lot alone. I told him it wasn't necessary and continued about my work, ignoring him now even as he stared. He left about 15 minutes before my shift ended into the dark Michigan winter, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't think twice when I punched out and headed to my car. I grabbed my snow brush and began clearing my car, enjoying the quiet that's unique to a snowy night. I began to hear the crunching of footsteps behind me. I brushed it off. I'm in a parking lot, after all. But they get closer, past any other car and directly towards my car, parked away from the others in employee parking. I look, and it's Tom, maybe 50 ft away and smiling. He tells me that I should have looked for him. He had been sitting outside waiting for me, and I should know it's dangerous for young girls to be alone in a parking lot at night. I began shaking. I tried to open my car door, but it was frozen shut due to the early storm. Tom came closer, calling me a stupid girl and asking God to forgive him. I debated running back into the store. He was so old he surely couldn't keep up, right? I didn't want to chance it though. He could have been younger, as I'm a terrible judge of age, and I am not exactly fast myself considering my weight. So I stand my ground. I fumble in my purse for my pepper spray, thankfully attached to my keys. I tell him to stay back. I have pepper spray and to go home to his wife. He glowers at me. I show him the teal canister. We're about 15 feet apart now. He's well within range. He calls me a bitch, spits at me, and heads back into the store. I get in my half-uncovered car and drive home, terrified. I called the store when I got home, only a mile and a half away, so about 2 minutes, and told them what had happened. They kicked Tom out and told him not to come back. He began cursing up a storm, and his wife had to come pick him up. He ended up getting arrested for child pornography a couple years later, but I don't know the details as I had moved away at that point. Can't say I'm sad to see him go, though. Next, this was actually on a Danish highway with lots of traffic. I was riding my motorcycle and pulled over at a rest stop. The stop only had a parking lot and a toilet, no gas station or anything, and was hidden from view from the highway by trees. As I stopped, there was only one car in the parking lot. A man was standing next to it. He came over and I thought he was just a tiny bit strange. He told me he was a German chemistry professor, but did not look the type. He had been sleeping in the trunk of his station wagon, and when he left through the rear hatch he had left the keys inside and the car was locked. He wanted to borrow my phone to call for assistance, and I let him use it. After the phone call, I was still talking to him, and he told me about the trip he was on. I was more or less trying to end the conversation when a rundown van with graffiti on it stopped next to us. Out comes a man who looked a bit off, like a mix of 80s denim jacket gang member and a drug dealer. He opened with, "How much is that motorcycle worth?" I found that slightly threatening. He kept on talking about how nice my bike was, as well as telling me his life story. He told me he was a West German truck driver in the 80s, driving a route to East Germany. He had an East German girlfriend who he met every time he was there. But they were discovered by Stasi, and he never saw her again. He was convinced she was killed by Stasi because of her relationship with him West German. At that point, he had moved to Norway and worked there as a butcher for 10 years. But then some things happened in my life and I joined the Foreign Legion. Now people don't just join the French Foreign Legion. The way he said it made me think he was saying that he did some serious crime but escaped the police/prison by joining the Legion, which is apparently a thing. Now, at this point I was 100% convinced he was bullshitting me. I just did not understand what he was trying to achieve. Did he want to steal my bike? Or my wallet phone? Meanwhile, the professor wanted to leave so bad, but he was still locked out of his car. Me and the crazy dude were speaking partly Danish/Norwegian, so he did not understand what we were talking about, but I guess you could say he understood enough to be a bit frightened. I wanted to pull on this crazy guy's strings a bit, so I asked him about something I'd heard about the Foreign Legion. That they give you a dog, and you have to care for the dog and have it as a pet, and then they make you kill it and eat it. He told me nope, that's not true, it's a rabbit, not a dog. And then he kept talking about it in a way that was very, very convincing. And then he pulls the ace out of his sleeve. Literally. He pulls up his sleeve and reveals a tattoo of a legionnaire of the French Foreign Legion in uniform, covering his whole arm from elbow to wrist. I mean, non-legionnaires don't have that. I was still trying to figure out what he wanted. He had still not asked what me and the professor were waiting for. But just then, a roadside assistance truck arrived to help the professor, and the crazy guy realized the situation, and then became annoyed because if he had known, he could have picked the car door lock in seconds. I have equipment for it in my car. Anyway, the professor and the crazy legionnaire became occupied with the locked car and the arrival of the roadside assistance truck. And I got on my bike and noped the fuck out of there. In the end of the day, I think he was genuinely a legionnaire, butcher and truck driver. I think he was a lonely guy, just looking for conversation, but no longer used to civilian-friendly conversation. I'm sure he had hundreds of interesting stories to tell, but I would prefer to hear them in a less isolated place than a Danish rest stop. Next graveyard shift worker at the time. Won't go into details, but I stopped a guy from holding me at gunpoint and taking my vehicle while I was pumping gas. Station was closed, it was term. Streets were pitch black. Guy comes walking up out of nowhere. Asks where I'm headed, what time it was, etc., just getting me to talk. Nothing alarming. Except he's fidgety and has had his one hand in his front leather jacket pocket the whole time. I say F it, was almost done pumping, decided if this was it, I'll make the best of it. Guy needs whatever it is more than I do, so I say I need to ride somewhere. Was almost home from work, but I've got a few dollars. We can stop for food because I'm hungry and don't mind having company. What's your name? Mine is Mary. I know that if you start getting personal with an attacker, it gets harder for them to hurt you. I was thinking, take me hostage, hold me at gunpoint, yell in my face. I can take this, but please don't take my life and don't leave me 2 hours stranded away from home in the middle of the night. I got done pumping when I finished, giving him a short amount of time to think on his answer, and in his panic at me offering him the things he was going to take from me, he goes, "Nah, I'm just gonna walk, thanks again." Leaves. I carry a taser now. Next, so this happened on my shift graveyard. I was helping another short-staff store across town. Had a woman come in. She seemed a little frazzled and is carrying a Bible, but otherwise she seems fine. She buys some chips and starts talking to me about crazy this coronavirus stuff. Yada yada. Then she tells me it's evil spirit pretending to be a clove of garlic. I of course think she's just messing with me, but no, she pulls out a piece of garlic, lays it on the counter and starts telling me it isn't garlic and is in fact a demon that wanted to possess her. She then starts asking me about if I believe in spirits or if I can see it, because despite looking like him, one of the humans that's a third demon, I'm really a human who's a third angel who was sent to Earth to help her expel the evil spirits and urges she feels, and that it's okay if I didn't know it because she can see it, and she leaves the garlic on the counter and tells me that she'll wait for me to deal with it. Now that's pretty much where the original incident ended. A few days later, about 2 or maybe 2:15ish on a Tuesday, I'm working the graveyard shift at my usual stall when this woman pops up again. She proceeds to just buy some candy and sorta hang out, asking me about Jade the jewelry type and instances and if we've met before. Nothing as weird as before. Now the weird thing is I didn't hear or see her coming before she approached the counter. We have a loud ass siren thing that turns on when the doors are opened and only shuts off when they are closed, which is normally not a big deal, but considering I've been stopping and cleaning in the front the whole time and had only gotten 2 or 3 customers beforehand, yeah, it was a bit weird. She hangs out a bit longer than rushes to restroom and doesn't walk out of it till about 6. Says have a nice day and just walks out the store like nothing, which freaks me the fuck out cause I cleaned the restrooms a little bit after she went in, and she somehow had managed to slip out or hide somewhere when I went to clean them. Outside of hiding in the stores, there is nowhere to hide in the restrooms and there's no windows to slip out of. Unlike a jackass, I looked up at the top of the stalls and at the ceiling thinking she had pulled a Spider-Man, but nope, she just poof. Disappeared, then reappeared and left super casual a couple hours later. TLDR customer told me she ate a demon trapped in garlic and I was half angel. Then a few nights later she shows up again, pulls a Houdini in the bathroom and randomly exits the restroom and leaves the store a couple hours later. As a rule, I don't believe in ghosts or any other supernatural stuff, but I do have a ghost story of sorts. It isn't very dramatic, but at the time I was freaked the fuck out and more than a little confused. Next, a few years ago at Beverly Beach State Park in Newport, Oregon, I was walking with my dog along this trail that runs along a fairly large creek to the left and a fairly steep hill filled with brush to the right. I was pretty close to the campground. I could still see the RV intense through the trees on the other side of the creek. As I was walking along, I saw another kid about my age, 14ish, and all by myself, and feeling a bit lonely. I thought I'd approach him. About 50 feet away from him, then my dog starts panic barking. I mean freaking the fuck out. His hackles are raised, teeth bared, tail tucked, feet against the ground. Usually my dog is as friendly as he can be. I'd never seen him act this way before, and so I was stunned. I tug on his leash and with all my strength, but my dog doesn't want to take a step closer to this kid. Finally, I drag him past, giving the kid a wide berth, then manage to pull my dog around the kid and further along the trail. As I passed him by, I apologize for my dog's behavior, and the kid says nothing. He just stares at me, head slowly tracking us, almost like it would in a horror movie. As soon as the kid is out of sight, Doggo immediately relaxes, wagging his tail and happy as a clam at high tide. Baffled, something in me forces me to turn around and walk back towards the kid, wondering what could have made my dog act like that. Yeah, I'd probably be the first to die in a horror movie. The kid's gone. I mean gone, and I have no idea where he could have went where I wouldn't have seen/heard him. Even if he'd taken off at a dead sprint down the long straightaway and towards the next corner in the 30 seconds my back was turned, I feel like I would have seen him, and thanks to the creek/hillside surrounding us, there really was only one way to go. I suppose it's most likely that some shy kid terrified of dogs was equally scared shitless of me and my dog as we were of him. But everyone I tell this story to that's the type to believe in ghosts are absolutely certain this was dog sensing an evil spirit. Next, Salvadoran guy here. About a year ago, I moved to the capital city alone to study, and I met some friends in the first months here. I went to the beach about 3 or 4 times before this incident. I'll give you context. I have a 2011 Corolla, which isn't a fast car, and sometimes I get stranded in the street. The beach is like 20 miles away. The highway isn't in the best condition, but even with this country being as dangerous as it is, this road is really safe. Well, we packed our things and getting on the road. It was about the half of the way, 10:30 p.m., and I saw a car next to the road. May have had a flat tire. I think twice before helping, because vehicle theft is known in this way, but I helped them. I stopped and saw this bearded fat guy, about 30 or 35 years old. He is obviously drunk, and he tells me that he has a flat tire, that he cannot change it by himself. He tells me his friends do not know that he left the beach. He needs to go home, and that his spare tire is in the back of the car. He accompanies me to open it, and before I know it, he hits me very hard on the head. The blow pushes me towards the street, and another man appears out of the bushes with the naked torso and a machete. I move around the car and quickly analyze the situation. None of my friends know that I stopped on the street. My phone is in the car. I am completely incommunicado. Both men are very drunk, but I am afraid that they could still attack me as I am completely helpless. I start walking around the car, with them watching me and trying to surround me. When I have a clear view of my car and the bearded man is on that side, I run like a cheetah towards mine and start it as fast as I can to shoot off down the road. I hear a shot, but I have no intention of looking back. I call the police and as expected, they just tell me not to walk through the area at that time because there were similar calls that week. I didn't travel alone in that area again, but unfortunately I can't stop helping good travelers. TLDR, I tried to help a man with a flat tire and I was attacked by two drunks, one armed with a machete. Next, an old job I had was located on an industrial estate in the middle of an expansive, abandoned and disused airfield. One of those places that even when the sun shone, if the estate was quiet, it was here. It was a small business, and because of the nature of the work, the main bulk got done in the morning, leaving the afternoons quiet and therefore only manned by one or two members of staff. On this particular day, it was just me as my colleague was out at a meeting. It was a sunshiny, normal day and I'd been in the midst of doing very little as you do when left to your own devices in a quiet office, when I decided to take a break to pee. Now, because of the weird layout of the building, to get to the toilets you went downstairs, took a right at a crossroads, the front door on your left, through the at that point empty warehouse, and followed the loop, leaving you directly under the main office. So there I am, having a grandiose wee when I hear the front door open and close. At this point, I'm not fast. My colleague is due back in, so it's most likely them, and if it's not, it'll be one of the drivers anyway who quite often pop in and out. As I finish up and flush the toilet, I peer out the small window behind the loot to scout our section of the car park and just see who's arrived. Only there's no cars bar mine. That's kinda odd, and I'm a little unsettled, but I shake the feeling off by figuring it's a nice day could just be a driver has walked around. As I move to the sink and start washing my hands, the floorboards above my head start making the very familiar creaks and groans of somebody ascending up the stairs, and I can tell exactly where they are by the sound of which stair they're putting weight on, so somebody's definitely in and heading to the office. For some reason, the weird unsettling feeling of our life starts coming back over me. So I finish up doubly quick time and come out of the toilets, just as the main floorboard of the office creaks. I'm calling out all the time as I take the loop back around and through the warehouse. As I reach the bottom of the stairs, there's nobody on them, and as they say all the time I've been walking, I've been calling out, figuring whoever it is would most likely stop and hang back to wait for me. But there's nobody. Now really creeped out, at the foot of the stairs I call out again, just in case they haven't heard, expecting somebody to poke their head around the main office door. Nobody does. There's just silence. By this point, I'm petrified. I'm on my own, in the middle of nowhere, and somebody has decided to play peekaboo in this building. With my heartbeat pounding in my ears, I take the first few steps. Alongside the stairs, there's a downstairs office and a small window that allows you to peek into the room. I checked that. There's nobody in there. I carry on up, now fully on guard. At the top of the stairs there's another crossroads. Main office on the right, conference room with shut door on the left. I reach the landing of the stairs, fully tensed, with my keys in between my closed fist. I turn the corner. There's nobody there. The office is empty. But I have 100% heard somebody come in and up the stairs. The door is so heavy that the sound of it opening or closing is unmistakable, plus the same for the floorboards, which always give away someone's movements. All the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The only place somebody could be is directly behind me in the closed door conference room, and there's no way I'm opening that. The room is massive and pitch black. I leg it downstairs just as my colleague pulls into the car park. I explain the whole thing to him, and together we brave the conference room. He pushes the door open. I hit the lights. Nobody. We scour the warehouse even though there's no way that somebody could have got out. The shutter doors are down and locked. We check every room everywhere. Nobody. To this day, it's the creepiest thing that I ever experienced in the building. I know what I heard. There was no way it could have been wind or heating, because the floorboards make specific noises when people are on them. I know. I'd heard them enough times. There was no way that anybody could have gone past me, whether in the warehouse or not, as the corridor is so small. I would have seen them or heard the door click again when they left. I've got no explanation. All I know is what I heard. Next, I used to work at a coffee place. We opened at 5 in the morning, but we were there at 4:30 to set up. We closed at 8 p.m. and left by 8:30 or 9, depending on when we finished cleaning up. One night a week was a deep clean session, so we'd leave closer to 9:30 or 10. I did my fair share of both opening and closing in my almost 4 years there, and definitely saw some pretty interesting folks in all that time, especially when opening. Lots of homeless people who were sadly mentally disabled or drug addicted. We were in a part of town that was not as nice as it used to be. One morning when I was opening myself and my opening bars, so I was the supervisor at the time, were the only ones in the store. I was in the back of the store setting up some tills. She was in the front brewing coffee and tea and so on. Suddenly she started screaming bloody murder. I grabbed a box cutter and ran to the front. She had been cleaning a drain on the ground by the sink right next to the drive-through window. She had been bent down, but when she stood up again, there was a man in with his face pressed to the window, literally inches away from her just through the glass. He was just staring at her, with this huge, super terrifying grin on his face, just up against the glass. He was super dirty and messy, and for some reason had a pink blanket wrapped around his shoulders. As my barrister was screaming and crying, mostly shocked from how quickly he'd randomly appeared and how close he was to her, he started cackling like it was funny. I don't really know why, but that pissed me off so bad. I didn't want to open the window obviously, so I just told my barrister to go into the back of the store and made eye contact with the guy through the window, scowled as hard as I could, and pointed down the street and yelled, "Fuck off now." He looked totally taken aback at first, but then kinda stumbled away down the street. He lingered on the block for a long time, but eventually left for good. I kept an eye on him for a while and then went and calmed down my barrister. Another time I was opening with a different barrister. For reference, I'm an average size female, early 20s. This barrister I was opening with is a late 30s male. When we opened the store, we'd wait in the parking lot for the other person to get there, one barista, one supervisor, and then walk into the store together. I arrived before him. When he got there, he parked a few spaces away from me. His car is black and small, so it could be hard to notice in the dark and from a ways away. When I realized he was there, I got out of my car to meet him. He left his car too and was walking towards me when he suddenly started yelling, "Get the fuck away from her," and running at me super fast. I heard footsteps run away from behind me and was super shocked. Apparently, someone had been hiding behind my car, waiting for me to get out. They hadn't noticed my coworker show up and was scared off by him, thank God, cause I didn't ever notice anyone was there. A few weeks later though, when I was closing with a different barista, it happened again. My barista's partner was picking her up from work that night and was waiting in the parking lot since she got there a little early. Luckily, my barista's partner was also a cop. She noticed someone was crouched hiding behind my car and called her partner to tell her to tell me what was going on, then went to investigate, shoo the guy away. As soon as he saw her, he ran away again. My barrister and her partner both walked me to my car though, just to be safe. So yeah, 2 attempted kidnappings within 2 weeks was pretty creepy. All for $15 an hour. Go figure. Next, I may be late to the party, but I've always wanted to share this story in threads like this one. 7 years ago, I was still in college, living in an on-campus apartment, and my mom was in town visiting. Late at night, after she had gone to bed, my boyfriend and I quietly left the apartment for an evening stroll to go smoke. We went to our normal spot and then headed back to the apartment. We're maybe 60 seconds from the entrance of the lobby when we walked past this 10-minute 12-foot tall statue that sits at the corner of the street. As we pass it, my boyfriend quietly says, "Don't panic and don't run," but there was a guy standing in the shadow of the statue and I think he's following us now. I make a slight glance over my shoulder and sure enough, some big dude is now following us roughly 20 feet back. We make a point not to walk any faster and alert him that we're onto him. I get out my student ID and get it ready to unlock the lobby, and as soon as we were through the door, I pulled the door shut instead of letting it close on its own, one of those delayed closing doors. Well, right around the time we make it over to the elevator we booked it, once we got inside there is Jude at the door, rattling it trying to get in. Definitely wasn't a student, and didn't live there if he didn't have a card for entry, so I'm fairly certain we avoided being robbed or murdered. Next, a few years back, I shared a house in the suburbs with a couple of roommates. It was a planned development with lots of benefits like a community pool, park, garden, etc. The downside was the local bus stop running at around 8 p.m. I worked graveyards and early shifts nearby, not an issue. But my roommate Luke worked a night shift that only clocked off at around 10 p.m. Then he had to ride the city bus for an hour to get 10 miles out from where the house was. I told him if he covered some of my utilities share, I'd pick him up in my car and save him the late night walk home from the city bus stop. This worked out great, and another roommate, Jen, started to join me for the rider to go on a late night snack run. One night I was sleeping and woke up to the sound of Jen calling my name over and over, Wacky, Wacky. I get up in a daze and think, damn, I fell asleep and missed Luke's text, now we're late to pick him up. Jen's in the driveway under my window and still calling me, Wacky, Wacky. I tell her I'm coming and she stops. I'm rushing now cause I have 2 roommates waiting on me, so I put on a jacket, go downstairs, grab the keys, slip on my shoes and open the garage and see nothing in the driveway except my car. I'm confused, since there's no way Jen's 170 cm self is hiding behind our dying rosebush or my Toyota. I think about going out to look around for her, cause maybe she walked down the street a bit to smoke a cigarette since she knows I hate the smell, but I realize I forgot my phone. I close the garage and go back inside. Jen got outside without it open. She can get back in without it. As I rush upstairs to where all our rooms are, I realize the lights are on under Jen and Luke's rooms. They're both home. I get to my room, check my phone and see that it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday. Luke doesn't work Sundays and Jen was never outside calling my name. Next, I got this job after my first year of college as a watchman. It was in a remote area overlooking the Mississippi River. There was a lot of floating equipment tied up to the bank. I was supposed to watch a radar screen and visually make sure that none of the equipment was stolen or sinking. To get to this tiny elevated office, I had to walk a few hundred feet through a wooded area. I worked from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., so it was usually dark coming in and going out. I never saw or talked to another soul. I had a radio phone in case I actually saw something. The previous 2 people doing this quit because they didn't like the conditions, but it paid very well for a summer job and I got a lot of OT. They didn't provide one, but they said if I wanted to carry a firearm, I could, but I didn't have one. Big red flag. I got used to it and actually like the solitude. I don't sleep more than about 4 minutes 5 hours, so staying awake was not a problem. A couple of times a night I'd take a big flashlight and go check to make sure all the equipment was okay, not sinking or floating away. One night I see this small crane barge is not tied very well and could easily float away if a passing boat rocked it a little. I am no deckhand. I tried to pull it in tighter, but with the current it wouldn't budge. My mistake was getting on the crane barge because I saw a rope I could use. That's when it came loose. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to jump back. So now I'm in the dark riding a breakaway barge. No life jacket, no radio. There was very little marine traffic, so all I could do was ride. There were a lot of things we could hit and sink, and I likely drown. When I did see a tugboat, he didn't see my flashlight. I rubbed against a bridge, then hit a large barge and started to go under it. The boom on the crane hit the deck and I was able to scamper up the boom onto the barge deck. I was stuck on a barge, but at least it was tied securely. The crane barge I was on was now wedged against the bow. By daylight, a passing boat saw me and came and picked me up. I had hundreds of mosquito bites, but the equipment was actually damaged. Next, last year I started working the graveyard shift at the newer hotel. It was built basically over the spare pasture for the farmer that still lives next door. One night I'm doing my late shift thing, which was absolutely nothing, and I was standing at the front desk browsing the internet. The front door is perfectly visible from where I was standing, and I thought I saw a flash of white out of the corner of my eye that came from that direction. There's a lot of stray cats around here, so I didn't think anything of it at first, on top of the fact that I was half asleep and there was a good chance it wasn't anything anyway, until I noticed it a second time, but much slower. I look up, and out of the sliding glass doors I saw a giant white mass. If that was a cat, it was an absolute monstrosity. Nervously, I walked towards the door to investigate, not knowing what kind of sumo wrestling feline I was about to encounter. I finally am able to see out towards the street, and lo and behold, there were 4 horses loitering in front of our hotel. I failed to put 2 and 2 together at first and had no idea where they came from, and if you can believe it, the hotel didn't provide me with any horse handling training, so I had no idea what I could do. The hotel is right next to a busy highway, and even at 3 in the morning I was worried about the horses wandering around unattended. I ended up calling the police, and after telling them where I was, I told them, verbatim, "I don't know how to explain this, but there are unattended horses outside." I didn't see anyone show up, but the horses were back in the pasture behind the hotel the next day, so everything must have sorted itself out well in the end. I know that wasn't very scary, but it was when I experienced it. 2 of my coworkers are convinced the hotel is haunted though. Maybe they've got some better stories. Next, this isn't a late night story or anything, but is one that still really creeps me out. Pop it from another thread, but makes sense here as well. When I was younger, probably 13/14-ish, I was cycling up to a park near the local shops to meet some friends. It was one of the first times I had cycled such a long distance on my own, but I was always a pretty street smart kid and I had a phone, so I didn't think much could go wrong. To get to this park you have to use a pedestrian cut-through that is pretty wide and you can see right the way through, but is enclosed by trees, so it's a bit dark. As I cycled through, a guy stood to one side pulling at a branch, but didn't think much of it. When I rode past, he lurched towards me and tried to stick the branch through my front tire to throw me off or something. Luckily he missed, but he just stood there whilst I cycled as fast as I could to meet my friends. Once I got to the park, I told them about it and was pretty shaken up. As I was talking, one of my friends had obviously noticed someone staring at us and asked me what he was wearing. All blue tracksuit / kit of a local football team, and when I told her, she ran to kind of like that guy, gesturing behind me. And there he was sat on the bench just staring at us. I freaked the fuck out, and all of us ran to one of the girls' houses where my dad picked me up, put my bike in the car and drove me home. I'm pretty sure I saw him again a few years later, but to this day I have no clue how he managed to get to the park at roughly the same time as me, considering I was on a bike and he was walking. Still makes me feel uneasy. Next, this is a good one, and it's 100% true. I won't give the exact location, but it was in Rhode Island about 10 years ago. I was working overnight security to put out the assembled tags, and there were numerous docks and very large warehouses where things were assembled. The job was great, as I could essentially play video games / do homework all night, minus a 20-minute walk about every 2 hours. The only problem with this job was the totally bizarre and creepy things that continually happened while on shift. You have to understand a large, rusty, foggy industrial yard like this late at night in near total dark, minus the lights you turn on then off, plays tricks on people's minds. And I, for one, am a very logical, science-oriented person. Yet we went through probably about 35 minus 40 guards in the year and a half I was there, the latter half being lost to other posts despite being paid double at this one for much less work. While working there, I heard all kinds of stories, but I'll give you some of the ones I personally experienced. One night, while patrolling one of the assembly warehouses, I heard something following me from above. It was the strangest thing. I couldn't find the source of the noise, but every time I turned around, I could hear something scatter and run. Something big. Go back to the security room and look through the cameras, and it's a massive damn cat. Some sort of mountain lion. I had to call animal control, and they hunted and caught the damn thing like 5 hours later. The next night it's back. I can see it in the cameras and call again. This time they couldn't catch it. At one point I was actually directing animal control to the thing which I could see on the camera, and they were walking around right past it. They never ended up with the second catch. This then happened on a third night. I almost got my ass in hot water before one of the responding animal control guys sat down right next to me trying to direct his buddy. To this day I still don't know what the fuck was going on with that. We never caught the second ghost lion thing, though it would return when the weather was warm. Another night I was walking across one of the large, empty sections of the yard and was hit in the leg by a wrench. A large, 5-valve wrench. Hit me hard enough where I stumbled and almost went down. Thing is, there was literally no place this could have fallen from, the nearest roof a goodly distance away. Someone would have had to have tossed it like a football to hit me with it. There was one night I was taking a shit in one of the stalls, and I heard the super large hangar open despite the controls for it being locked. I was weirded out, but decided to finish my shit then investigate. It then closed again, then opened. Then as I'm getting ready to wipe my ass and troubleshoot this thing, the bathroom door rips open, slamming hard enough to give me a heart attack, and every stall door slams open. Given we were on the docks, there were a lot of seagulls. Occasionally one or two would sit on the end of the pier and watch us do rounds. One night a small flock of them, probably about 5-10, flew into a really compact ball. It was super weird. I've never seen them do that before. They then proceeded to follow me around at a set distance. If I approached, they went away. When I walked away, they followed. When I went into the guard shack, they all landed on the roof. Weirdest damn thing. The last example I'll give was one of the few deaths that happened on site. A worker not wearing a harness during a warehouse roof repair fell through and landed on some machinery a good 40 ft below. He was dead by the time the ambulance got there. The following day, the roof caved in on the CEO office during an international conference call, sending him to the hospital. The weird thing is the main office building was new construction with no maintenance issues whatsoever. Next, I drive about 40 minutes out into the country every Saturday for band practice, and I'm usually headed home about 1:02 am. The place we get together is not super remote, but it is all woods and farmland, and the road is basically empty but late at night. One night, I saw a set of luminous eyes right on the tree line on the opposite side of the road. I figured it was probably a deer because I see a handful of them every time I make the drive. Anyway, as soon as I saw the eyes, I started slowing down because deer are absolute idiots and will jump right into the path of your car with no warning, even if they see you coming from a long way off. As I was getting ready to pass by, I swear it looked like whatever it was stood up on its hind legs and ran into the woods. It moved quick too, like a horizontal sprint, not like big vertical hops like deer do. It took me a really long time to reconcile what I'd seen. I kept telling myself, "No dude, you were just tired, it was just a deer." But I've seen hundreds of deer and this thing was too tall. And it was too skinny to be a bear. And it moved too fast to be a person, not to mention the eyes. I still have trouble wrapping my head around what that might have been. Edit. I wanted to respond to some of the theories in the comments. Most this would be almost more disconcerting than seeing some monster or ghoul because I live about 800 miles away from the natural habitat of the moose. Bigfoot. I live on the opposite coast from where Bigfoot is usually spotted, but we did have a lady report a Bigfoot sighting in that area a few years earlier. She said she saw a Bigfoot and a Bigfoot baby. It made the news and everything. It was probably a black bear and a cub, but I wasn't there, so who knows. Skinwalker/Wendigo. This is the one that terrifyingly makes the most sense. I know that most Wendigo lore is from Native American legends, and the tribes who talk about them are usually located in the Midwest. I'm on the East Coast, so geographically it doesn't track, but the fact that I thought it was a deer before I stood up and ran off does track to how Wendigo I described. SCP, I didn't know what this was, but I looked it up and now I'm scared to drive at night. Thanks. Next, not what I saw but what I heard. I was on a solo motorcycle trip across the great USA. From New York to southern Florida, then straight across to Los Angeles. I crashed at the inn for from a shooting in New Orleans, and a guy hyped up on crystal meth tried to fight me, but none beats the chill I felt deep in the woods of Louisiana. I camped at national parks 85% of the trip and loved meeting the people there. No real scary animal encounters, all was good. This particular day was Thanksgiving 2015. I came out of the local market with my dinner for the night and a little camp spot in mind. My father and his son saw me and my motorcycle, so they stopped by to chat. All was well until he asked me where I was planning on staying that night. I told him. His face went white. He begged me not to go. I asked why. He said there's a group that practices dark arts in the woods around there, particularly during Thanksgiving. He said people have been known to go missing. Needless to say, I was freaked, but the night was coming fast and there weren't any nearby alternatives. I told him I would heed his advice, but ultimately, I went anyway. No one was at the camp spot, but there were a few RV. I thought it was odd, but was happy for some peace and quiet. I made a fire, ate some turkey out of a bag, and tried to relax, but something about the place was off. I cannot explain it, but it was kind of like the feeling of being watched, coupled with the fact that these RVs seemed recently used and his stealable belongings hang around. Motorcycling day in and day out takes a huge toll on your body. I was tired as hell, but that uneasy feeling was keeping me up. After a few hours, I decided I needed sleep or risk repercussions the next day. I let the fire die down and crawled into my tent. Just as I settled in, I heard it. A terrible guttural sound. It was unlike anything I've ever heard. An equal mix of a human scream and an animal dying. One dying scream, as it were. Just once. It felt close but also far. Chills pulsated throughout my body, instantly activating my fight or flight. I jumped out of my tent and shined my flashlight in that direction. Nothing. I picked up a rock and slowly crept around, but once again, nothing. Needless to say, I didn't sleep a wink that night, but no one ever showed up. I can still hear the scream and feel those chills when I think about it. Next, back in September of 2017, I loaded some camping gear onto the back of my bicycle and spent the next 20 days riding almost 1,300 miles clockwise around Lake Michigan, starting and ending at my home in South Central Wisconsin. I didn't really like paying to sleep in the ground, so instead of paying for proper campsites, about an hour before dark I'd just start looking for somewhere I could disappear into the woods or something to pitch my tent. As the second day neared its end, I was riding on a gravel bike trail that paralleled a small highway between two little towns. I started looking for a place to camp, and before long I found what I thought would be a decent place. A small grass road crossed the bike trail. To the left, it connected to the highway. To the right, it led to a clearing with maybe 8 or so semi-truck trailers. All of the trailers themselves were overgrown with grass and weeds, indicating they hadn't moved in years. There were decently maintained paths between them, and in some places the trailers blocked those parts from view in 3 directions, including from the road. So despite my slight uneasy feeling about the place, I set up my tent. In the final few minutes of twilight, I was sitting in the tent, eating dinner and writing in my journal, when suddenly I heard the squeak of an old door hinge, followed a moment later by the banging sound of a door being violently swung shut. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was already a little bit uneasy about the place. It was a bit creepy, but in a cool way. So when I heard that sound, it very much amplified my uneasy feeling about the place. My mind jumped to all kinds of confusions about how it must have been somebody living in one of those trailers coming out, and it was only a matter of a few moments before he'd seen my tent. So I decided to get the hell out of there. I broke down my tent in record time, loaded everything onto the bike, and continued on by the light of my headlamp, as it was now pitch black out. Maybe a mile down the bike path, I found another clearing in the woods, this one without creepy abandoned trucks, and pitched my tent once again, before having a peaceful and uneventful night's sleep. In hindsight, I realized that the noise was likely just an unlatched trailer door swinging in the breeze. But even so, the place was fucking creepy, and I was almost looking for a reason to break down my tent and continue on. That noise ended up being exactly the reason I needed next. This happened to myself and 2 friends roughly 6 years ago. We have told very few people, and those that we have told seem to think that we are fabricating it or making it up completely. Having just learned to drive, I decided to take my 2 friends on a day trip. On the way home, we stopped at the service station to grab snacks. On our way out, we passed 2 individuals. They were both dressed head to toe in bizarre clothing, including baggy trousers, smart jackets, full headscarves. These didn't look like religious headscarves that we were used to seeing, but more like thick men's cotton winter scarves that they had wrapped around their faces. Sunglasses, it was around 8 p.m. at this point and very dark outside, gloves and fedora-style hats. My memory tells me that they were both around 6 tall, and my instinct tells me that they were male, but it was hard to tell, and you couldn't see even an inch of their bodies. As we walked past them on our way out of the station, they seemed to stop and stare at us, and as we continued to walk, we realized that they were walking after us. All a bit shocked, we broke into a sprint as soon as we were out of eyesight and jumped into my car. I pulled my car around ready to exit the service station. My headlights pointed towards a wall to the right of the station, and the couple were stood staring at us about 20 m away. Everyone who was in that car swears that the light from my headlights shone off the couple's sunglasses, creating a glare effect, but we have since phrased robot eyes, which felt like they were firing laser beams at us through the windscreen. I appreciate that this was likely just the reflection from their glasses, but it seemed like an abnormal amount of glare considering the distance between us and definitely contributed to our fear at the time. Now terrified, I put my foot down and exit the station as quickly as possible and go full speed ahead on the motorway. We drove at an uncomfortably high speed for 10 minutes straight. At this point, I was surprised to see a car overtaking me and pull up alongside us, blasting their horn to get our attention. We turn our heads to find it's the couple from the station. In a small beaten-up coupe, they had chased us for at least 20 miles down the motorway and were signaling for us to pull over onto the side of the road. They pulled in front of me and slammed the brakes on trying to make us pull over. We approached an exit at this point and I indicated as if we were turning off. They turned off in front of us and we carried on straight down the road. We breathed a brief sigh of relief as we thought we had shaken them off. My friend in the backseat turned to look out of the rear window and swears on his life that they were reversing back up the slip road back onto the motorway. We continued to drive as if we were being chased all the way home, and to this day we have no idea who the couple were and why they were chasing us. Next, this is gonna get buried, but I have a perfect story for this. I live near the Jimmy of PA and went to college south of Pittsburgh, almost in West Virginia. The first time I drove by myself back to school, I had a GPS that my dad had set to no freeways because he didn't want me driving on freeways. So I'm in the boondocks of PA, dirt roads, no signs, trees on trees. If I rolled down the window, I'm sure I would have heard some banjo music. I was out there. I end up on a paved road in the middle of the forest and suddenly entered a little town. The only people I saw were two guys that had apparently just finished digging a large hole. That was actually the first thing I saw as I went into this town. Not a great start. I noticed the street signs were French names and I thought it was interesting. Not too weird considering I was in what probably used to be French-Canadian fur trucking territory. There's a lot of French names in southwestern PA. Then I passed a beer distributor that had a banner out front that was in French. That's when I started panicking. I passed the gas station and the prices were about what they were at home and in my school's town, and I knew I was going south, so it's not like I somehow ended up in Canada. Then pretty much as I got to my peak point of panic, the town just ended. It didn't peter out like most towns do. Probably after 15 minutes of wondering what the fuck kind of town I just passed through the road, I was on turn to a brick road, and in another few minutes I was in Pittsburgh. The trip usually took me a little under 4 hours if I stopped along the way to get food or gas. It took me almost 6 with no stops for that trip. Changed my GPS settings real quick after that. Next sir, out on a routine exercise somewhere in Korea, company X and me and half a platoon are out 4 hours ahead of the rest of the BDE looking for a spot both open enough to set up the HQ tents and sleep area, but also with decent cover/concealment. Long short, found a good spot around 2000, radios back and started to set up bivouac for the night, assign guard shift, establish 306 security, etc. Well, of course, we've been going for a good bit, so several of us need to relieve ourselves and pair off to do so. So I'm sitting with my 1SG, discussing tomorrow's patrol, and PV12's nothing name changed obviously comes bounding over to us all full of excitement and proudly proclaims, "Sir, I found some landmines." 1SG and I are of course skeptical. We're over a dozen kilometers in from the DMZ, so there should not be mines out here. Also, PV12's Nuffy is fresh out of AIT Basic and has probably only ever seen a landmine in video games. But, of course, we grab our NOD and IR flashlights and follow PV12's Nuffy. He leads us to a deer path where we meet two other soldiers coming back from taking care of business. They do not corroborate his story, but Snuffy is very insistent. The deer path winds around quite a bit with large pits where it looks like trees have fallen and pulled the topsoil and roots out like they do when knocked down in a storm. Finally we get to the landmines, and indeed, there's something metallic and triangular sticking out of the topsoil on the side of the slope, apparently revealed by corrosion. Safety first, we turn off the NOD and pull out a pair of surefire flashlights on whatever it is. It's got Japanese characters on the outside. 1 minute and 1 Google reverse image search later, and we are starting at a bona fide Japanese landmine left over from more than 50 years ago. And at this point you'd think, well, it's got to be dead by now, right? Oh no. We start looking around and notice that the pockets of missing dirt that the deer path winds around do not in fact appear to be natural. In fact, the trail dead ends at a few of them. 1SG calmly radios back to the platoon sergeant that we, and possibly the whole platoon, are presently at the edge or in the midst of an active minefield, which PV Snuffy is very proud of discovering and seems utterly oblivious to the fact that, had everyone not decided to follow the deer path to take a piss, someone could be dead right now. Well, the good news is that we get out of there, all 39 of us, back the way we came exactly. We're okay, Army. ERD comes in the next day and we get to listen to them clear the area of over 75 unexploded mines. Finding yourself out in the wilderness and in the middle of a minefield is not fun, and at night, downright terrifying even if you've been trained. Next, I lead a trail running group. One day we were on a run and one of our runners said a new runner had fallen behind because she had to stop to use the restroom. We waited a bit but she never came. The trails we run are really easy to get lost on, so after a few minutes I went to look for her while the group went ahead to our next point. I called out our specific call to her. We make a calling bird sound. Nothing. Ran some more, called out, nothing. Finally got to a point that I should have found her. I switched to calling out her name and eventually start saying hello, and anybody out here? I say hello, and finally I get an answer back of hello. It's a small creepy voice, maybe 100 yards away. Sounds like a kid, but honestly I don't know the woman at all, and maybe that's how she speaks. I ask, "Are you woman's name?" Voice responds again, "Hi." I ask, "Are you with my trail group's name?" Voice responds, "No," right behind my fucking ear, but of course there's no one there. At this point I assume there's a small child about to murder me, so I run like a scalded dog. I run so far off course that I ended up well below our next checkpoint and had to climb up. My Strava map is amusing because you can see how far I went off trail and how high my heart rate was. When I joined the group at our checkpoint, the woman was thankfully there and I had a great story to tell. I like to think that it was just someone out on the trail messing with me, but that doesn't explain how the voice sounded so close to me. Next, I was on night shift at the hospital and one of my rooms was on the far end of the unit right before this long hallway made of window that was never lit at night. As I was walking out towards this room, I see a figure, hulking with arms and legs spread like they were about to run. Thick black denim jacket and black pants like someone had stuffed it full of something, and just a wide-brimmed black hat. I did a double take because something unsettled me more than just the stillness of it standing in the dark in front of all those black windows. I swear to God, it didn't have a face. I legitimately dropped the flute or tubing I was holding to the ground as I just stood there, completely frozen in horror as I just stared at this empty pale flesh. I'm almost about to scream when it starts to turn around away from me, only to realize that it's a little old lady bundled up in a jacket she's put on backwards. Her pale blonde grey hair was just puffy and enough to look like her face. I don't know what she was doing, but holy crap, I've run codes and traumas before and I've never been so scared in my life as being stared down by some puffy faceless night demon old lady. Next security guard when I was about 20 years old. I patrolled several buildings in rundown area with slow businesses. One of the buildings was a medical treatment center / daycare-like place for seniors. I always hated walking the halls there after hours. One night I was walking and heard a piano playing, and I thought someone was playing the piano in a large communal room. I walked there and saw there was no one at the piano and I got very spooked. As I got closer to the piano, I saw someone had left a classical radio station playing on a boombox behind the piano. I laughed it off, but something still felt odd. I went up to the second floor to check. All of the medical rooms were locked up. After checking about 4 doors, I reached out to grab the final door's handle. I pushed the handle down and it moved more than it should have. It was clear it wasn't locked. I decided to open the door and see if I could set the lock from the inside. The moment I pushed the door to open it, something from the other side pushed back hard. My first instinct was to push harder. I don't know why, but that's what my head told me. The door opened a bit more and then another use of force from the other side came and nearly closed the door fully. I stopped pushing the door and realized $8 an hour wasn't worth whatever was on the other side of the door. I slowly let go of the handle, backed away and walked out of the building. I locked all exits so whatever was in the building couldn't get out without keys. No clue to this day who was there and why. Next, it's been a while since I shared, so I'll go ahead and retell my story. Back in 1998, I was fresh out of high school and working my first job as a security guard. My friend worked security in the nearby city, and I was in the habit of talking to him on the phone every night. One night, around 4 am, we were talking and out of nowhere he says to me, "Hey man, do you see that?" I was surprised because he probably worked at least 10 or 15 miles away, but I looked around and it dawned on me that everything around me, inside the guard shack and outside, was bathed in a faint emerald green light. I told him so and asked where it was coming from, and he just said to me, "Look up." I did so, and there, just above the tree line, was what I can only describe as a small emerald green sun, about a quarter the size of the yellow one we all know and love. It didn't move, and the light didn't fluctuate. It was just there, like any other star in the sky, like it belonged there, illuminating the entire countryside for miles and miles around. I stared at it awestruck for hours. My shift ended at 7 am after the sun had risen, and it was still there when I left. I suspected I would wake up and see a blurb about it on the evening news along with an explanation, but there was nothing in the media, and no one I asked had any idea what I was talking about. As far as I know, only 3 people saw that thing. Me, my friend, and the guard who relieved me that day. He later told me that he went into the building for a few minutes after I left, and it was gone when he came out. I never understood why no one else seems to have seen it. Granted, it was giving off a very dark green light, and it took a moment for me to notice it even after I had been told to look around, but whatever this was had been in the sky for at least 3 hours, and was illuminating a minimum of 10 square miles, covering a section of the suburbs and the city of Rochester, MI. Even at that time of night, thousands of people would have been up. Someone else must have seen something, but to this day I've never met another witness. I've never seen a UFO report on MUFON or anywhere else, and I've never heard of anything that seems like a rational explanation. Next, this is gonna sound like bullshit, but I promise I'm not making this up. Last summer, I was driving home late at night from a sporting event, and my parents were a few minutes behind me. It was around midnight, and I was driving through my neighborhood, so there weren't any cars out. It's quiet enough during the day, so it's really dead at night. All of the following happened in a matter of seconds, so please don't judge me for panicking. I was going around a small curve and a huge creature ran out into the road right at the side of my car. I swear this thing was as big as my car. I screamed and swerved into the left lane to avoid it. I braked so I didn't hit the car parked on the left side of the road, and my brake lights lit the thing up behind me. I only saw it for a second in my rearview mirror. It looked like a giant black humanoid dog, and my tail lights caught its eyes so they lit up red. It looked like it was straight out of a horror movie. Braking was a mistake, because it started fucking chasing my car. I screamed again and I gunned it, and rolled through the next stop sign because I wanted to get out of there. I grabbed my bag and my shoes, and I debated if I should wait for my parents in my car, or if I should make a run for the back door. But then I thought, what if it finds my car and gets me through the windows? I I could visualize it jumping out from the gap between our garage and the neighbor's house, and my stomach dropped. But what if it gets me on the way to the door? I decided to just make a run for it, and I'd throw my back at it if I had to buy time. Obviously, I made it. My parents laughed at me when they got home. I don't believe in supernatural shit, but I have no idea what the hell that was. Next, I was on a backcountry hiking trip with a couple of friends. We'd been hiking for about 4 days and had spent the past day completely off trail. We were miles and miles from somewhere any casual person would be camping, and we hadn't seen a soul since we left the parking lot. Anyway, I wake up in the middle of the night to find my friend who I'm sharing a tent with just staring at me. I'm a bit creeped out, but assume that I've woken up because of him staring at me. But then from outside our tent I hear a woman singing and realize that's what woke me up. This is completely impossible. She sounds close-ish, and we definitely would have caught someone camping that close by. It's clearly a woman's voice, and I'm the only woman on our trip, so it definitely couldn't be anyone from our group. And I've heard mountain lions that sometimes sound a bit like people, but they sound like a woman screaming, not singing. It was pretty windy that night, and it being the wind is the only slightly plausible explanation for what we heard, but again it sounded so clearly like a human woman singing that I just can't totally convince myself it was only the wind. My friend sits up like he's going to get out of our tent and check what's up, but I just get this horrible wash of dread come over me. This feeling that if I let him leave the tent he won't come back. I'm not afraid of the woods in any way. I've spent a lot of my life backcountry hiking and have had several run-ins with wildlife/withered bird storms with not ideal equipment, and never have I ever felt one tiny fraction of the fear I felt that night. We stayed up until dawn, just huddled in our tent together, freaking out. The singing lasted about an hour and then just stopped, and we didn't hear anything weird for the rest of the night. The next morning we checked around camp, and there was no sign that anyone had camped close to us, and our other friends had slept through the night and didn't hear anything weird. The rest of our trip was totally normal, but I'll never forget that night. I have no explanation for it, and I've never known anyone who experienced anything similar. It's something I've noticed on a few occasions while driving near the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico. The roads are desert roads, lumpy in spots, potholes. It can be a rough ride. One night, quite late, I was going through one of these rough stretches and was flipping through the stations on my radio when I stopped on someone speaking to me, SB, the Navajo language. I knew from previous trips there's a station that is in their native tongue, but plays classic country. So I waited a minute for the next song. When it came on, it was not some George Jones song, but recordings of tribal dance songs. As I'm not knowledgeable in the slightest to the language, I can't say what it was, but it was beautiful and different, and I continued to listen. Slowly, the bumps and humps and undulations of the road, without moving to a different stretch of construction or moving into a different zone as far as I could tell, ceased. I felt like someone was standing or squatting beside me in my truck, and having heard tales of skinwalkers, I dared not turn my head. And then I felt like I was decidedly not alone, and I felt hands on my shoulders and arms, and a sense of gratitude came over me and I began to cry. Through this though, my headlights, which normally seem so dark and worthless on this stretch of road, shone brightly. Again, this just made it clearer the road was as old and in disrepair as ever, but my truck seemed to float along. Every time I get close again, I replicate this sensation listening to this channel, when I can find it. And even at times when it doesn't come in clearly, I feel a presence and the ride becomes smoother. Next, this happened in the mid-90s and is probably more confusing than scary, but who knows. I was in the 7th grade and school had just shut down for Thanksgiving break. I was at home in our living room watching Fire in the Sky, which is already a pretty creepy movie. My mom asked me about an assignment I had to complete before school started back up, and I remembered that I had left it at school. My dad, always being the one that just wants to help, drove me over to school to see if maybe we could sneak in to get it. This was about 9 of them, I'd imagine, and it was a very snowy night. So we arrive at school, and my dad starts driving me to different doors, but of course everything is locked up. However, I can hear loud music being played over the audio system when I walked up to the doors. This was a rather large middle school, so there are quite a few main and secondary entrances to try. We drove to one of the main entrances on the other side of the school, and although it was locked, there was a large backpack vacuum and hose lying on the ground just inside the door. I started to bang on the door, hoping whoever was using the vacuum was nearby, but no luck. The next entrance we tried was the same scene. I could see a similar vacuum laying in the middle of the hall, but just loud music, and no one answered my banging and yelling at the door. After about 15 minutes of this, and trying all of the doors, I remembered that we hadn't tried the door leading into the school kitchen. We drove back around to basically where we had started, and it just happened to be open. I told my dad I'd be back in 10 minutes and walked into the school. I was immediately put on edge because the music that I could previously hear outside was extremely loud. I assumed this must have just been a nightly cleaning ritual for the crew, but it was still unsettling hearing this loud music blasting in this dark, empty school. As I made my way toward my classroom, I kept noticing piles of cleaning stuff that people had clearly been carrying or working with just lying in the middle of the hallways. It looked as if whoever was carrying this stuff was in the middle of working and then just suddenly dropped what they were doing. I kept yelling hello, but no one answered. Only the loud rock music echoing through the corridors. I made my way downstairs to the janitor's room, which was open with the light on. I had never seen it open before, so I was both excited to finally talk to someone and curious to see what it looked like inside. As I walked into the room, I noticed that it was larger than I expected, and that there is a long table set up with plates and food. It looked like some sort of Thanksgiving potluck dinner, but at this point I've walked through nearly the entire school, doing everything I could to make my reserve known, and seen no one. It was about then that the movie I was watching, Fire in the Sky, rushed back into my head. I now walked much faster to my classroom, still yelling hello as I went and still receiving no answers. I finally found my assignment and got the hell out of there. Once back in the safety of our car, I tried to inform my dad about how weird the situation was, but he's not the most imaginative guy and I'm sure was only half listening to my story. It's 24 years later and I still can't figure out what was going on that night. I walked all over the school trying to find someone, and all I found was cleaning equipment abandoned in the hallways and an uneaten meal for 10 plus people. I'm sure there was probably a good explanation for the scenario that I walked into, but I've never been able to think of one. Next, it's probably too late for anyone to notice, but I've been trying to find a place to post this and I always seem to miss the creepy threads here when they're fresh, so here goes. It's in the 90s in California during summer. I'm 14 and go on a 2-week summer camp where we go from LA to Sequoia National Park and do whitewater rafting on the American and another river, camping at various stops on the way. I don't remember if this was before or after we got to Sequoia, but we stopped at a campground along a lake. I don't remember if it was a private campground or if we had booked the whole area. It was just me, 17 other campers and 6 counselors, and no one else was supposed to be there. Our tents were set up on the hill overlooking the lake and about 500 feet from the lake / dock. It's dusk and we're about to get the fire going when I notice a boat coming up to the dock. I tell the counselor, it's strange since you don't see any other docks or campgrounds around the lake. The rest of the lake is surrounded by trees except our spot, so I'm not sure where he got his boat in. The counselor, a young lady, starts walking to the dock. By the time the boat is at the dock, and even from my distance you could tell the occupant was a large man. He definitely had a hat on and I think fatigues. The counselor stops and gets on the walkie-talkie. 2 of our big male counselors join her and they walk down to the dock together. By this time, the boat guy has gotten out of the boat, tied it, and got a big duffel bag. The trio of counselors start walking towards the dock while boat guy is walking inland. Even before they get close, the counselors seem to stop and talk among themselves. Then the lady counselor turns back and walks back to camp. First it's a regular walk, then she runs. She says something to the other counselors and we're immediately told to drop everything and get in the vans. I looked back towards the dock and the 2 male counselors are walking backwards, keeping an even distance from the boat guy. By the time I get buckled up in my van, the 2 male counselors run up and get into their assigned vans and we book it. The counselors won't tell us what's going on, but we arrive at the nearby town and order dinner. 2 of counselors go off somewhere we don't know, but later they arrive with a police car. After dinner, the cop escorts us back to the campground where there's 2 park ranger trucks and 2 rangers with long guns are out there patrolling the area and checking our tents. We're told to move our tents into a tight circle and go to sleep, but no one slept since you could hear the rangers and counselors patrolling and shining their lights around. At morning, we make breakfast, pack up and leave. The counselor said the boat guy warned of bear sightings, but I don't buy it. Regardless if it was bears or some crazy guy, I'm still pissed they took us back to spend the night. But maybe it was because the closet town where we ate at was tiny and couldn't accommodate us, and we left all our gear at the campground. The real kicker is that several of the campers said some of their clothing was missing when we got back. No valuables, just clothing. Next, I don't really fit to the criteria, but this was a late night experience for me. I have posted this before on Reddit somewhere, but that was years ago. During 2009 and 2011, can't remember the exact year, but it was definitely during this time I was forced by my parents to attend church gatherings and participate in activities. Anyways, they bought me tickets to go to an event called Steubenville that was hosted by SDSU here in California. It was boring and lasted all day. Our church group was then invited to sleep at USD dorms because SDSU was too full or something like that. Our group shares the same floor, but the wings are divided by gender. So boys are on the left wing and girls are on the right wing. After some late night horsing around, we all go to bed. That's when I wake up around 3 and to use the restroom. I walked into the communal bathroom and hear the shower running. Since we had to be awake at like 6 and to leave for day 2 of the event, I figured someone wanted to get a head start and shower early, so I disregarded it. I sat on the toilet and browsed my iPod, no headphones to pass the time. I finished my business, but something about the shower was off. It sounded like no one was in the shower because it was on full blast, yet you couldn't hear the water hitting someone's body. Instead, it was a steady and blaring stream. No one came in or out of the bathroom since I entered. I even stick around a few more minutes to see if anyone would walk in to scold them about being wasteful, or see if they'll come out of the shower soon and prove me wrong. After about 10 minutes or so, I realized someone could be passed out in the shower, so I immediately go and announce my presence. I express my concerns and vocalize that I will be entering the shower due to a safety concern. I open the door and see absolutely no one in the shower, yet it is turned on to the max. I remember waking up the next morning and hearing that there was a recent suicide in the dorms, as well as the same thing happening to one of the girls during our communal breakfast. I didn't say a word of this to anyone until that morning because they were talking about it first. Next, worked in care most of my life, and this seems to involve night shifts quite often. Working for an agency one time, got sent to a mental health facility for a night shift. Passed along to be told that there were 3 night staff, and 2 of them were on one wing, and I, the newbie, would be on the other wing along. I figure this is bullshit and it's just the non-agency staff wanting to work together and whatnot, but whatever. Night shift mostly involved sitting watching shitty television. The place had the basic terrestrial TV channels, and they all tend to turn off at midnight of one of them. So yeah, the job requirement was to peek into the bedrooms every hour and make sure the patients hadn't hurt themselves, or to answer any call bells. The hallway lights were turned off though, so I had to do this with a giant torch. This sounds like a horror movie setup already, right? There were a lot of odd noises, like doors opening and closing, and odd tappings, so I kept popping out of the lounge to check if someone was in the hallway. No one ever was. Anyway, one room check. I peeked into the room and no one was in there. She had been there 30 minutes prior when I had peeked in. So I opened the door and popped into her room, thinking she might be in the bathroom. So I wanted to air the door to check. Bathroom door was open, no lights on, no patient. Just me and my little torch beam. I looked under the bed, behind the curtains, checked the bathroom again, lifted the torch to check if she was Spider-Maning it in the corner of the ceiling. She was not. I turned to leave the room, and as my torch swung around to the doorway, there was a white human figure, long white hair, head hanging forwards, arms hung at her side, highlighted by the weak and white beam. I let out a little screech of surprise and, let's face it, fear. And then went to the doorway and escorted the patient back to her bed. No idea where she was hiding. Her bedroom door was locked from the outside until I opened it. Next, so I went outside for walks at night sometimes. It's not the best habit, but I figured it was alright to do that again because I moved to a gated complex. But I was wrong. One day I went back from a walk and found a stranger in the fountain/garden circle, and he was looking at me as I got closer. I won't say I know everyone in the neighborhood, but I know a lot of people and their families because I'm part of the Women's Association, and yet I never even saw this guy. He could be a guest, sure, but he struck me as odd even from a distance. He was just standing still in the fountain in the middle of the night, so that's odd enough. But he also looked unstable to me. His eyes were red. He looked like he hadn't showered for a while and his clothes were full of stains. Did one of the neighbors go through a rough patch or something? I thought, but I haven't heard anything like that. I decided to walk the long way around. We kept our eyes on each other, then out of nowhere he started screaming. I couldn't tell what he was saying, but it sounded horrible. He was really angry, or sad, or whatever intense emotion it was. So I bolted, and he ran after me. He stopped screaming as he was chasing me. Instead, he got out a knife. I honestly thought I'd die if he caught me. I ran the fastest I had ever run in my life. But I didn't run straight home. I didn't want him knowing where exactly I live. So I jumped over fences, trespassing into other people's properties, which was a horrible decision in hindsight, but I didn't think that far at the time. Got home and hid in my second story, up all night. I belatedly realized I might have invited disaster upon my neighbors, but I didn't have the guts to get out again. In the morning, I immediately went to look for the security to find out what the shit had happened last night. Security said there had been complaints about some ruckus and asked me about it. Yeah, that was probably me. But they didn't find any guy when they investigated last night, though apparently some people did see someone running. But probably me, not the guy I described. They looked for him for some time, did night patrols, but nothing. To this day, I still have no idea who that was and what was up with him, and I stopped going for night walks. Next, there's a tunnel called the Sensible Tunnel in Tennessee. It's not a very long tunnel, like you can see the other end of the tunnel during the day, but at night, some people say it turns into a dark portal for the paranormal or the demonic, especially on a full moon. The entryway of the tunnel is completely graffiti-ed out due to it being abandoned. Graffiti words like portal to hell and Satan's bunghole are all the typical graffiti you'd normally see in places like downtown Detroit that covers the tunnel inside and out. However, what really makes it stand out is all the paranormal activity that's been reported from it. Apparently that tunnel has a bad history of crime and murders that it has been used for. Everything from screams, ghosts, noises, including laughter of little kids, can all be heard emanating from darkness of the tunnel. The darkness at night is completely black, much darker than the surrounding dark of night, much like walking straight into a black hole. The stories of this place keep getting weirder. One famous story was one I heard a while back. Some guy decided to go drive himself to the tunnel and wanted to keep it parked in there on a full moon, with the car covered in baby powder. All he had with him was a voice recorder and a gun when he pulled up and turned on his blinders and slowly drove into the tunnel, then turned off the vehicle completely once inside. What he said I'll always remember. While he was parked in the tunnel, it had a coldness that wasn't normal for the humidity of the summer, despite it being in a solid concrete tunnel. He then turned on his voice recorder with his gun in hand with the engine completely off. He sat and listened for what seemed like a few minutes. He said he could hear the drippy drop noises from water and what sounded like small voices that were faint and could barely make them out. What startled him was when he felt and heard something brush up against the side of the passenger door in the midst of complete darkness. He jumped so badly he dropped the recorder to the floorboard and rushed to turn back on the car. It didn't start. He kept turning the ignition key and nothing. Battery acted like it was completely dead. He now started to panic and grabbed his phone for a light. He looked at it and he apparently forgot to charge it, so it had a little less than half a charge on it with a dead signal, though good enough for a light source. He turned on the light from his phone and he could see his breath in the car as he began to breathe heavy. He kept desperately trying to get his car to start while making sure his doors were locked. He said he just sat there with the gun in his hand for what felt like I was panicking, watching the light from his phone slowly die. He knew he was going to have to get out of this car and look under the hood or run like hell. He had to do it quick cause his battery life was almost dead along with his only light source. He said he felt like just leaving the car in there and running for his life. He knew the tunnel wasn't that long. If he was fast, he could make it. He decided to turn off the light to think about it some more, with his breath and the drops of water falling from the tunnel being the only thing he could hear. He then held his breath to listen and to make sure no one else was outside. He said so he heard faint laughter like giggles, with his gut screaming at him to stay in the car. He turned the key one last time with a prayer and it turned on with a loud vroom. He put the car in reverse and floored it till he was out. He said he was hitting the steering wheel and shouting in victory while he got the hell out of there. Once he was at a safe enough distance, he finally got out of the car, but what he found made him shit a brick. The baby powder that covered his car was now full of tiny, small handprints from front to back. Next, me and a friend were driving through a highway in the absolute middle of nowhere late at night in southeastern Oregon. I'm talking basically nothing for about 100-mile radius, well, maybe not 100 miles, but seriously there's nothing out there but dirt, diseased jackrabbits, and brush. It was pitch black, and all we could see is where the headlights shine. There was no moon that night, and if you looked out the side windows it was just the void. The only thing that kept me awake was the occasional jackrabbit suiciding into the tires. Do you have any idea how long it takes to clean caked on rabbit brain off of a truck? Anyway, we came upon this rest stop. It was just a shack with some toilets in it, a street light fixed to the top of it, and a little gravel parking spot. We parked and got out, and my friend went to the bathroom, leaving me standing outside. Because of the light on the shack, my eyes didn't adjust. So where the light ended, it was just pitch black. Everything was perfectly silent, you could hear a pin drop. And for whatever reason, standing there, I was freaking terrified. You know that feeling that something's watching you, or that certainty that something's about to crawl out of the shadows where you can't see and get you. That, but with a hefty helping of existential fear and dread mixed in. Unsettling was kind of a mild way to put it, to be honest. You literally couldn't see anything outside of the ring of light from the shack. If everything else in the world suddenly dropped away into nothingness except for the rest stop, you wouldn't know the difference. It looked and felt like there was just nothing, but at the same time asterisk something asterisk that you couldn't see or hear watching at you and waiting to pounce. It's really hard to describe, but I was super freaked out for some reason. Like I could just be grabbed and dragged into the silent void with nothing left of me but a scream echoing through the empty desert. The world could end and everything I knew could be gone in an instant, and I wouldn't have the slightest idea. I mean, I'm not really scared of the dark. I love abandoned places and solitude. I like it at night. I love big, empty places and knowing you're completely alone. The desert is cool. Literally nothing happened to scare me, but for whatever reason, I was ready to knock right out of there as fast as possible. Maybe my brain knew something I didn't. I don't know, man. Being in the desert in the middle of nowhere in absolute pitch black is a spiritual experience. Especially when you find some form of civilization, even if there's just a rundown bathroom, you really just feel like you're not supposed to be there. You don't belong there, but hey, you might be stuck there forever. TLDR, I have an existential crisis at 2 a.m. for absolutely no reason at a bathroom in the middle of a desert, and so the night grows quiet once more. The whispers fade, the chills settle into silence. But these stories, they linger, don't they? You've just heard fragments of real lives of unexplained things seen in the dark or footsteps with no source to voices heard behind closed doors. If any of these moments stirred something in you, a memory, a shiver, or a question speaking, we want to hear your story. Speech balloon, drop it in the comments. Or send it privately if you dare, you may hear it whispered here one night. Candle, if you enjoyed your stay in the shadows tonight, tap that like button so we know you're listening. Subscribe for more strange dreams and sleepless tales. And don't forget to share this story with someone who sleeps with the light on. Until next time, sleep lightly, dream deeply, and remember, not all stories stay in the dark. Some follow you home. A waxing crescent moon. Good night from Sleepytime Stories. Waning crescent moon.